So, Game of the Year 2024 has just recently announced their nominees, and these have got to be some of the most unique nominations I've ever seen for Game of the Year. You have which is a platformer featuring a main character that was created for early PlayStation demo games like Astro's Playroom, Astrobot Rescue Mission, and the oldest of this set, The Playroom. All games which were developed to demonstrate the use of the PlayStation camera and DualShock 4 controller. For this character to come from what is essentially PlayStation's version of fucking Wii Sports to become Game of the Year material is pretty impressive, I will say. Then there's Black Myth Wukong, which is a Souls-like based on the old legend of Sun Wukong, from a Chinese studio in which this is their only international release. So this is likely the first game you've ever seen from this studio, unless you happen to be a big fan of Art of War Red Tides. Which, I mean, surely you've heard of Art of War Red Tides, right? Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, also getting nominated, is really insane. This is the first DLC ever to be eligible for Game of the Year, and its nomination itself pushed the boundaries and rules and regulations of the Game Awards. Personally, I want this one to win because it would be funny and make everybody on Twitter very upset. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the highly anticipated sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is the remake of the original Final Fantasy VII game. You know, the one with Sephiroth when he does the one thing with the sword, and then, yeah. Then you have Metaphor Refantasio. I've literally never heard of this prior to the nomination announcement, and looking into it for like 8 seconds, this is just Persona. It is Persona with a different name. No, possibly the most eccentric nomination of all this year is Balatro.
This is a fucking card game standing up to fucking Sun Wukong.
He's not even a real fan, bro. Hasn't even beat the DLC.
I'm too busy playing Game of the Year. This is a deck builder roguelike that could be confused for solitaire or poker, made by an anonymous indie developer under the name of Local Thunk. So when you're surrounded by all the usual suspects for Game of the Year nominations, what makes Balatro different enough to even be eligible for this nomination? So to answer this question, I sank plenty of time into the game to get an understanding of why it was just so great for myself. And for a little bit of context about me, I love card games. I played every deck builder underneath the sun. I've played Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Hearthstone, Inscription, Marvel Snap, Slay the Spire. Shit, if Sex with Hitler was a card game, I'd have bare minimum 30 hours in that shit. So I would say I'm a card game connoisseur at this point, right? What I've learned from Balatro is there are literally hundreds of different ways to play. If you're a fan of poker hands like the flush, you can make it significantly easier by just destroying all of your other cards and filling your hands with clubs. Now you have a flush every time you draw a hand.
I fucking love Balatro!
If you're a fan of the straight, destroy all but 5 of one sequence of card ranks. You have the world's easiest straight spoon-fed straight into your hand.
I fucking love Balatro!
Let's say you're a particularly big fan of the number 9. You won't believe it, you have a build where you can only play the number 9. Or if you choose to skip all that nonsense, you can just play the game like you would normally play poker. You can enjoy that with your scrumptious lunch of white bread and skim milk, since you don't like to enjoy anything or have fun with anything at all, man. With over 100 jokers in the game, you can have 5 or more passive abilities that always change up how your hand functions and changing the game even further. You can also use a series of tarot cards, planet cards, spectral cards to warp your deck into whatever evil-ass concoction of cards you want. One thing I will say I've discovered while playing Balatro, in a similar way that all non-crab crustaceans eventually evolve into crabs in a process called carcinization, all Balatro builds eventually should evolve into the evil-ass 2-pair spam build. If you can't tell, I am most definitely a 2-pair supremacist. All other poker hands should be purged from existence. The biggest concern with a game like this is the replayability. If you've played every build and you've done everything there is to do, there is no replay value, which is why there are achievements that force you to play certain builds that you haven't tried yet, which unlocks new and unique ways to play, creating this domino effect of you just creating more ongoing content to consume as you learn the game. It is honestly surprising that you can push the boundaries of poker to such an extent that it gets nominated for Game of the Year. But is it justified in getting nominated for Game of the Year? It's really not completely out of the question. So, you remember that one game I mentioned earlier, Inscription? While this isn't the Game Awards, right, it did win Game of the Year for the Game Developers Choice Awards, so the thought of a deck builder roguelike being Game of the Year isn't as crazy as you might think. Not to mention, this art style is pretty damn nice to look at, right? A little off topic, but I mean that's pretty great.
No.
What I will say though is there is definitely a trend of primarily action adventure games winning, with a few exceptions like Overwatch and Baldur's Gate. So the odds are definitely stacked against it winning, but I personally would like to see it win. That'd be quite silly in my opinion. That's all I really have to say though about the Balatro situation. Balatro situation is crazy. If you guys want to see me actually playing Balatro, or if you want to yell at me for whatever Game Awards nominee you'd rather see me win, let me know in my comments and I'll be sure to respond. I read all of my comments. Thanks for watching and have a good one.